Okay, so here we are, different location, different time, different place. We had a little bit of an issue with the recording equipment the first time we did it. We went back to WeWork. Unfortunately, we didn't have an HDMI cable, but here we are at my office doing this anyways because I promised you that we would have slides and video. So we're gonna do it this way. I hope this works out for everyone. At this point, you guys have all seen the slides if you've wanted to, and those have all the links, so you don't have to worry about taking notes while you're watching this. You can just, I'm probably showing you this on my website or it's through the meetup, and you've got the links for the slides right down below. So a little bit about myself. My name is Greg Medore. I've been kind of hanging out at WordPress Hollywood for the past 4 or 5 months. I've been doing most of the audio and video work, editing things together and helping out wherever I can. I'm here at my office, which I rent in Glendale from one of my clients called Where Decorum, and I own a small concierge IT company called Tech90. We do all sorts of things ranging from IT support, networking support, replacing cable modems, routers, switches, replacing hard drives, optical drives, all that type of stuff. But for the past few years, we've been getting into the world of WordPress. So I'd like to thank Greg Douglas, who is here with me. Come on, poke him. Hi, Greg.
Hey, I'd also like to say a warm thank you to Greg Medore for actually giving this presentation twice now. Since the first time we did have some technical difficulties. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and now I'm going to get off camera.
He's my audience. So thanks to everyone who came out the first time. Thanks for Greg for bringing the recording equipment back out to do this again. Couple of assumptions that I want to make right off the bat. We're going to assume that everybody watching this knows a couple of basics about how to install WordPress, that you understand the basics of WordPress, like the difference between pages and posts. Basically, what we are going to be talking about today is WooCommerce. WooCommerce is a WordPress plugin. Most of it is free, but it makes all sorts of things that used to be very difficult much easier. So thanks to WordPress and WooCommerce, you don't need to be an IT developer, you don't need to be an experienced PHP person, you don't even need a lot of CSS or design background, but with a little bit of that extra plus what WordPress and WooCommerce are doing, you can actually put together a very nice site for very, very little expenditure. But tonight, we're here to talk about WooCommerce, and that's going to be broken down into about 5 sections. In the first section, we're going to talk about just a few items that you need to be aware of before diving headfirst into WooCommerce and WordPress e-commerce. And this is both for people that are trying to start their own stores as well as developing for others. In the second section, we're going to talk about how to install and integrate WooCommerce into your WordPress site and into your theme. In the third section, we're going to have a look at some basic settings that need to be changed to make the site work for us here in the United States and here in California. In the fourth section, we're going to talk about how to create a single product. We're not going to go into a full inventory of products, but one product that has a few options that you'll probably likely want to use. And finally, we're going to look at a little mobile styling package that somebody over in France developed, and that helps to streamline some of the work that goes into making WooCommerce look a little bit better for mobile devices. A couple of quick notes before we get started. As we've already talked about, slides are available down below on a link on the Meetup site or up above, likely on the Tech90 site. The links all start with http://www.tech90.com/woodemo. So they all link to redirects on my site so that you can skip writing all of the URLs down. So we do have about 30 minutes. I'm hoping to get through everything in the same sort of time frame that I did the first time. So, and just like the last time, I'm hoping we're starting now on that 30 minutes. On the second half of that night, we did a little bit of work with individuals that had questions for Hollywood WordPress. They brought in their projects, and we were able to answer some of those questions that night. And I'm assuming we're going to do that again in the future. So keep an eye on Hollywood WordPress Meetup to find out more about what's going on in the future for them. So, why are we here? Yes, we are here to talk about making money, both for us and for our clients. But there's a little bit of paperwork that you might not be aware of that we need to make sure is done before jumping right into WordPress. If you are engaged in business here in California and you intend to sell or lease any kind of a physical product, you do need to apply and acquire a California seller's permit. If you're engaged in some form of business in Los Angeles, you need a Los Angeles tax registration certificate. Now, in Los Angeles, engaged in business actually has a very defined meaning for those that live and work here. It basically means if you physically perform work within the city of Los Angeles for 7 or more days per year. That's what it means to be engaged in business in Los Angeles. Now, we have the tax twins. The tax twins, what I affectionately like to call the tax twins, are sales and use tax. Sales and use tax in the city of Los Angeles, and I believe in all of California, have basically the same rate. Okay, those rates are for 2 different things. Sales tax is actually imposed on people that sell things. It applies to all retail sales of any tangible merchandise here in the state of California. Now, when it comes to sales tax, as an e-commerce vendor or somebody that's selling products here in California, you are allowed to request reimbursement by your customer for sales tax, and that's what shows up on your receipt as sales tax. That's actually a tax that you're asking your customer to reimburse you for because it's paid by you. Use tax is actually the brother to sales tax, which is what you are, as a California resident, are expected to pay on products that you've purchased from an out-of-state vendor that doesn't pay California sales tax, so that California still gets their tax revenue as a result of things that are purchased out of state. That is a tax that's supposed to be paid by consumers. The reason all this is important, even though I'm not 100% versed in all areas of tax law for small business, anybody that does work on any kind of a business here in Southern California or in California, or really anywhere, it's your requirement. You are responsible for understanding the tax laws in your area. This is intended to be kind of a primer of where to look for certain information. The California Board of Equalization regularly does do small business seminars. Those are mostly free, and it is important to go to something like that before you start your own e-commerce site so that you do understand what you are responsible for and what you're not responsible for. Now, moving on from paperwork. What do all these companies have in common? Target, Neiman Marcus, and Michaels. Any guesses, Greg Douglas?
I would say they all have been hacked very recently.
They have all had some form of data breach within the very recent past. Now, personally identifiable information, which is kind of the code word, PII, or personally identifiable information, is becoming more and more important as we become more and more digital. Information about you is pretty much one of the most sought after commodities in the world, whether it's Google or people selling you things. It's something that people are looking for. Part of the nature of exchanging material goods, both in the physical world as well as in cyberspace, is the exchange of this type of personally identifiable information. Now, basically there's a unwritten rule that your customer is trusting you to treat that information with respect. But what you may not know is the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, aside from your customer hoping that you treat that information with respect, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission rules very regularly that the firm that collects personally identifiable information is responsible for that personally identifiable information. So that person is potentially every single person that's running a website, a WordPress site, an e-commerce site. Anybody that's collecting information, you are responsible for it. Now, to minimize exposure to other people's personally identifiable information, and especially sensitive personally identifiable information, which is generally considered social security numbers, credit card information, that type of thing, we do recommend that small businesses that aren't dealing with heavy volume to work with payment gateways, Authorize.net, PayPal, things like that. So that does limit some of your exposure to that personally identifiable information. And just as a rule of thumb, it's a good idea to encrypt. Anytime you're concerned whether or not data is being possibly intercepted between you and your website or your website and your customer, just encrypt it just to be safe. And the way we encrypt things is using these things called SSL certificates. SSL certificates are very, very little data files that do a lot of work for people to encrypt data and protect that personally identifiable information. They are used to encrypt and decrypt the information that's transmitted back and forth, whether it's an email server, your cellular phone conversations. Everything works based on SSL certificates. So it does show when that little lock comes up in your web browser, it shows that you respect your customers and you care about their business enough to provide that kind of step up of that layer of security. SSL certificates can be acquired directly from your web host. It's really easy to do. Most web hosts, Bluehost, HostMonster, the big web hosts, you can just call them up and say, hey, I want a SSL cert for my website. It'll probably be sold by Komodo or GeoTrust, or there are all sorts of them that are out there, but whoever your particular web host uses, it can be available for as little as $50 a year. Being Tech90, we will not harvest any personally identifiable information or set up a customer to harvest any personally identifiable information without SSL encryption being turned on. And just as a side note, I also encrypt the login control panel, or the login panel for my WordPress administration, so that just as another security pathway. So that takes care of the paperwork. That's the boring stuff. Let's get started with actually making a store. I like to think of installing WooCommerce as three separate but very important parts. The installation, the theme integration, and then finally taking a look at the system status to make sure everything is working the way we expect it to. We're starting with a brand new installation of WordPress 3.8 with the 2014 theme. To install it, we click Add New from the Plugins panel in our admin system. We do a search for WooCommerce, click Install Now, click Activate Plugin, and then we are presented with two wonderfully purple banners. That's the easy part. Now we get to some of the fun stuff. These new two purple banners at the top of the admin panel announce a few things that still do need to be done. We're going to take care of the easy one first, which is the installation of the WooCommerce pages. Those pages, this is just a sample page, it's just a clean installation, but you will see a slew of new pages get added to your WordPress installation. And what your home page was missing in the upper right corner as being pages now looks like that, with several new pages added to that home screen. Now when we click Shop, you'll notice we do have a little bit of a problem. On the left side where there's supposed to be a sidebar, the sidebar doesn't actually show up, and the actual black on the left where the sidebar is supposed to be is obscuring the shop contents. So you've got a couple of different choices to resolve this. You can either use a WooCommerce compatible theme. You can, if you have the skill set, like I don't, but I like to try to, you can develop your own custom WooCommerce compatible theme. Or you can get basic support by creating a template file for WooCommerce, and that's the actual way we're going to demo it tonight. Doing so basically tells WooCommerce exactly what it's supposed to do when it tries to display your content, and it gives the theme that you're working with basic WooCommerce integration. So there's a theme integration guide. More detail about what we're about to do is available using that theme integration guide. It's available when you install WooCommerce. It's this button right there. So one of the things that you will want to do at this point when you are adding a theme template file to whatever it is you're working with is, if at all possible, create a child theme for whatever theme you're working with. It's important to probably familiarize yourself with what a child theme is at about this point. We're not actually going to go over this as part of this presentation. Feel free to send me an email, join in with another meetup group, and we can definitely explain what a child theme is and why it's a good idea. I will have the theme, I've got a link right here, the child theme that we're creating with 2014 available for anybody that wants to download it. It'll be linkable in the slides. You're either down below or up above. Okay, so the actual process of creating this template, we use the page.php template file from the theme that we're working in. we duplicate that file and we rename it to WooCommerce.php. We then take that WooCommerce.php file and add it into the child theme that we developed either a few moments ago or at some point in the past. At that point, we have to edit that template file, and we need to remove the loop content and replace it with a request for the WooCommerce data instead of the page data. Now that WooCommerce data is nothing but a little PHP call that says WooCommerce content. And again, this is the basics of integrating WooCommerce into your theme. There's all sorts of hooks that can be integrated with WooCommerce, but we're just going to talk about adding the basics. So now once you do that, all of a sudden after creating that template file, WooCommerce shows you what you want it to show you in the right place in relation to where your theme is. For the designers of the room, I didn't really care for the fact that there wasn't any padding around the actual shop itself. So I added a little bit of CSS to it just to pad that in. And so there is our nice and empty but definitely functional store. Now, the system status check. This is the third part of the actual installation. WooCommerce is actually very nice, and they give you the system status area of the custom post type under WooCommerce. Just click that system status to check to make sure that your installation is looking good and that there aren't any errors that you need to be aware of. And lo and behold, and this is fairly typical with most web hosts, one error is pretty common. It's this WP memory limit error. By default, most WordPress installations are using 40 megs of memory, but WooCommerce recommends actually having 64 megs. So I basically say, who am I to argue with WooCommerce? It's their platform, so we'll just let that ride, and we will do what they tell us to do. So in the WP config file at the root of your WordPress installation, we just need to add a request. It's a very simple request that says define, and then in parentheses, WP memory limit, comma, 64 meg. And again, this is all much more clearly visible on the slides if you wanted to download them. And yeah, it's a fairly simple process. Once you do that, that resolves that error, and it also checks off another mark on our list of things that we're looking to take care of this evening. Okay, that takes care of the basics of how to get WooCommerce to actually run on our site in a way that makes visual sense. Now we need to tell it how we want it to actually behave. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at the settings, and those settings are underneath the WooCommerce settings area within the admin control panel. And you can see that there are quite a few areas of settings to be aware of in WooCommerce. We're not going to go through all of them this evening, but we are going to touch on a few that we changed just to demonstrate the store and that are basics for us here in the United States and in California. Aside from those basic settings, you can add more options directly from WooThemes. They're the developers of WooCommerce, and they do offer an official extensions gateway that you can download additional things from, different payment gateway options, authorize.net, other solutions that you may want to use for your own projects. So let's get started with the General tab. The General tab, we at least want to change the base location from London to the United States and here in California. Our currency here in California is clearly US dollars. In addition to those basic items, I do like to also set the following of forcing secure checkout. That kind of harkens back to our conversation about SSL, and it's a good idea to actually have an SSL certificate that you are forcing people to use when you're working in your store. And I also like to turn on unforce HTTPS when leaving the checkout. And what that does is that tells WooCommerce to remove that secure encryption once you leave the checkout process. Looking at sales tax. The tax options, as expected, are a little bit more complicated. If we are selling physical goods, we do need to enable taxes and tax calculations. If we're just selling services, you can leave this off because services aren't currently taxable here in 2014. That may change in the not too distant future. I hope it doesn't, but it may. Here in the United States, we like to show prices exclusive of tax. There are some places that do require you to show prices inclusive of tax. As an example, Australia requires you to show GST in the actual price of the goods that you're selling. It is the responsibility of the store owner to decide which of these options is correct for their own customers, but generally speaking, it's the developer's responsibility to explain what all these options mean and to properly implement the laws when they are presented to them by the store owner. Here in California, tax is generally based on the customer's shipping address, so we need to make sure that that option is selected. And there's great FAQs from the Board of Equalization, which is California's department that collects sales tax, and they can explain all sorts of things that I don't have time to cover this evening. Looking at sales tax, there's basically two ways to calculate sales tax, and again, I'm not a sales tax attorney or accountant, so these are two loose ways that I want to explain just to show some of the feature set that is in WooCommerce. Remember that sales tax is paid by business owners to the State Board of Equalization, and also remember that you are asking your customers to reimburse your sales tax as part of the purchase. You should try to be as accurate as possible while maintaining a functioning site. Now on the left is option number 1, which includes a separate calculation for city and state sales tax rates. Those are individually broken out. In California, the base sales tax is 7.5%, and then the cities and regions here in California add their own local sales taxes that cover education expenses, roads, things like that. On the right is a second option, which is just a single line sales tax calculation based on the store owner's location. So two different options. It just depends on kind of how the store owner wants to set up the store. Now both of those have positives and negatives. In the case of what we're talking about with WooCommerce, looking at the standard link in the tax options submenu, here's what a standard tax rate table can look like for that first option. You'll notice that 7.5% rate for the state sales tax here in California is listed as priority number 1. The flat state sales tax may change, and that's where you can change that. The rest of this table lists all the cities in California and their respective local city tax rates as priority 2. Now this, if maintained properly, will accurately calculate the state sales tax and the city sales tax as two individual line items. Now, if this table was maintained correctly, it would need to include city names and rates for all 1,800 plus tax regions here in the state of California. I noted this somewhat humorously in my presentation, but when I actually did this, it killed the website. Sales tax wouldn't be calculated at all. So it's really up to the store owner, the developer, to make these judgment calls. If you're dealing with a client base that wants this separation in sales tax, then you don't really have a choice. There is a couple of folks that are trying to develop a plugin that will dynamically return what the sales tax is supposed to be based on the shipping address, but for now this is the best that we have with WooCommerce. Now, looking at the second option, you can see that this is much simpler. This will only show one tax rate calculation, and it's based on the store's physical location. Now, since it is the store that is actually paying the sales tax, this is also, in my opinion, perfectly acceptable, but it is important to note that if you do overcharge your customers, and the Board of Equalization does basically make this statement a blanket statement, if you overcharge, the Board of Equalization is expecting you to pay that to the board and not just put it in your pocket as profit. I tend to err on the side of overcharging. I would rather actually get a reimbursement at the end of the year than have to deal with penalties and surprise charges. Remember, it's your responsibility to develop a site that calculates the sales tax somewhat accurately based on the instructions of the store owner, whose responsibility it is to know the tax laws. If you do have any questions about sales tax laws, work with the Board of Equalization directly. And our final step on our settings journey here is the Payment Gateways tab. Now, payment gateways actually play a very important part in the shopping experience, but it's a part that can be big or small depending on who the payment gateway is. The shopping cart handles a lot of the front end, the UI, the UX, all the categories, all the products, all of that stuff that's styled into your website. That's the shopping cart. You can have an external shopping cart. PayPal will allow you to set that up where it's actually running in PayPal's website. But for the most part, we're talking about WooCommerce here. WooCommerce is a shopping cart plugin, so that's the world that WooCommerce would live in. payment gateways are actually the tool that processes the transaction, and it's the point in which money changes hands. It can be set up like what PayPal does as an escrow account, where the monies go into that escrow account and then you have to transfer it into your bank account, or it can be a direct transaction right into your own checking account. Refunds are also typically done at that payment gateway. And at this point, the orange space that's in the middle of these two things is where the really important nuts and bolts stuff happens. WooCommerce needs to properly talk to your payment gateway, whether it's PayPal or Authorize.net, and it needs to deliver the right information in a way that the payment gateway can actually understand reliably. And thanks to plugins like WooCommerce, a lot of this work that used to all be hand developed is now prepackaged and ready to go for you. Now we're going to look deeper into the PayPal settings because PayPal is actually included within the WooCommerce installation, and it's what most people are familiar with. So in order to have a look at PayPal directly, we are going to deactivate the others that are unneeded for this demonstration, which are both backs, which we disable, and check, which we also disable. Now, looking deeper into PayPal, we're going to click on that option, and we are at minimum, we need to enter your PayPal email address and your receiver email address. I also like to, just for my own personal development workflow, I also like to enable the PayPal sandbox. The PayPal sandbox is a way to basically test the entire transaction without actually charging a credit card. Some people like to just put products up for a penny and actually go through the whole payment gateway option, use their own credit card, and you can reimburse yourself if you want to go through that road. But I like the PayPal sandbox. You do need to sign up for a developer account with PayPal to get a sandbox account, but just make sure you throw your proper email address in after you create that sandbox account, and you'll be on your way. So that takes care of step number 3. Our basic settings are done. This will basically give you a shopping cart that will look and function the way you want it to here in the state of California. So let's add a product. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be selling an LA Kings jersey. I'm an LA Kings fan. We didn't have any Anaheim Mighty Ducks fans, even though the Ducks beat us in our outdoor game, but that's okay. I'm still a fan. Our final listing today will display a featured image, a product title and price, as well as a product description. We're also going to show options for the size of the jersey as a pull-down menu, as well as a listing here in the additional information. We're also going to show a gallery of images and a SKU and a listing of the available options in that tabbed interface at the bottom of the listing. Now, to add a product, it's as simple as adding a post, except we're not going to the posts, we're going to the WooCommerce area, and we're going to products and choosing add product. At that point, we get a page that's very similar to what adding a blog post would look like. So we add our product title just like we would add a title to a blog post. That adds our title to the upper right corner, exactly where we would expect it to be. We enter a SKU as well as a regular price, which displays those two values on our product page. And finally, we enter the short description down at the bottom, which fills in the description on the right side of the product page there. Now we're a good part of the way there. Now we have to tell WooCommerce that this isn't a one-size-fits-all jersey, which nobody believes that jerseys should be one-size-fit-all, but we do want to make sure that we show a way to have sizes. Now to do that, we have to use the attribute subset within the product data settings itself. Now that's there in the middle of the page. And when you put your SKU and regular price in there, you see that you have an attributes panel on the left side. Now within the attribute subsettings, we can add any number of potential attributes. If you wanted to have one product listing on your site for just jersey, and then you wanted to have different names, different sizes, different colors, whatever you want that can be kind of broken down as a numerical attribute, you can create it within this attributes area. So all we need to do is we need to click the add button down at the bottom there. Once we do that, we can give it a name. We're going to give it, in this case, available sizes. And we're going to provide a listing of options as a string separated by that pipe character. Now the pipe character is actually shift and backslash for those that are wondering what that character is, but it's the vertical line in between each of our options. Now that actually, just doing that one simple process adds the whole additional information tab and then shows that available sizes with the options that you put in between that piping character. Now that's great, but users do want to just be able to choose that from a pull-down menu rather than actually having to, say, add it to a notes field or call in after they order and ask what size that they're going to get. So to do that, we need to come back to our attributes area. And instead of telling WooCommerce that this product is a one-size-fits-all simple product, we need to tell it that it's actually a variable product. Now when you change that and you save your actual settings, you get two new options. One is the variations option, and that's on the left side of the product data area. And the other is a check mark box that says used for variations. Now we do need to make sure that that used for variations check mark is selected. After we click the variation subset on the left side of the product data area, you'll notice that when you come in for the first time, that we need to actually click the Link All Variations button. Once you click that button, WooCommerce actually creates individual listings for all the possible variations based on the attributes that were entered. So if you entered two things, you would have two variations. If you entered two different types of variations that had two things, it would be four variations. At that point, we then need to identify the product information for each of the variations that we created. So each product needs to actually have these pull-down menus selected for which item number this is, and you can see the item number to the left of that pull-down menu. But that item number will have to be selected as small, or as black, or white. And you can have small, black, Drew Doughty. You can have small, white, Anjay Kopitar. So the number of variations will increase the number of these pull-down menus. So each product should get its own SKU number, as well as it needs its own regular price. And I would recommend at this point making sure that you put your weight and your dimensions in for shipping purposes. We're not going to get into the shipping details within this presentation. Shipping in and of itself is its own beast, and we could probably do a half-hour session just on shipping. But this is where you would enter that information. And once you put that information and save your settings, then your available sizes appears below your description on your product page. You can now choose your large, small, whatever size you want. The SKU updates correctly. And now we've got our product page. So the last phase of adding a product listing is to add images of your product, because everybody likes a good-looking image. An image can be added as the featured image, or it can be part of the images below the featured image, which WooCommerce calls the gallery. Now, adding images is fairly straightforward. We need to click the Add Product Gallery Images link under the Product Gallery heading, and you can either drag and drop the desired images from your C drive or your images folder, however you want it to get added, but you can either drag and drop the files right to the well directly, or you can click the Select Files button and browse to the images that you actually want to add. So here we have all 7 images that we want to add to this product listing. So we select all 7 of those images and then click the Open button. Those images all get added to our product gallery and our media library. And what I like to do is add all the images at once, and then using the little check marks that are available to us, we actually check off the images that we want in the gallery. So we check all those images, we click the Add to Gallery button, and those product gallery images get added to our product listing. The images that we just added then show up right where they're supposed to be, right under the featured image in our product listing. And finally, we need to add the featured image. So we click that Set Featured Image link. We check off the image that we want to actually show as the featured image of our product. We then click the Set Featured Image button. And once we do that, the selected feature image should show up exactly where we expect it to in the product image. So just like that, we've created our product that we're going to sell. It has all the options that we want to have listed. You can, like I mentioned, have the black jerseys, the white jerseys as separate jerseys. You can have the different names be the separate jerseys. That way the only attribute is the size. Or you can mix and match however makes sense to you for your inventory management purposes. So that's creating a product. That takes care of another item on our agenda. And the last element we are going to talk about tonight is a very brief discussion about mobile styling. Now, that is very pretty. We like it. It looks the way we want it to. It's very easy to read on a desktop web browser. However, we do have a problem if the theme we want to use is not actually fully optimized for WooCommerce. That's what it looks like on a smartphone. Now, the default tight columns that WooCommerce creates don't really work very well on a smartphone, as you can see. It has a tendency to be very difficult to read, but the product page is worse. That's the default product view when you look at that exact same product listing that we just showed on our desktop browser, and it has the world's largest pull-down menu. Now, this is not, in my opinion, usable. It doesn't look right. It doesn't create the impression of a successful business, and we want to make sure that you guys that are developing these sites give the best foot forward, and this is not it. So I started working with WooCommerce, and I started to say, okay, let's just piece it together. Let's make it work for what we need to. And I started looking at how WooCommerce was put together and how it does its calls, and I just couldn't believe that nobody had done this before. So I did a quick Google search, and Google thankfully came to my rescue. Alexis Nominee, if you are watching this, you are one of my favorite people because you have saved me a tremendous amount of work on several occasions. But Alexis Nominee, he came up with a very simple two-part solution for just basic mobile optimization. This is not intended to replace a full-blown theme. It's not intended to replace, a developer that's developing something custom. It is intended to help people get to where they want to be, to get started with, their WooCommerce site and then to build from there. You can, of course, leave this. I'm sure Alexis would appreciate it if you gave him a shout out. Hence the reason I'm giving Alexis a shout out. So the first part of this two-step process is a very short little snippet of code that gets added into the functions PHP file as part of your theme. And the second is a CSS file that he has made publicly available that has some basic but some pretty nice mobile optimization built into it. The actual process involves creating a functions.php file in your child theme. It is important to note that functions.php does not work the same way that other template files work. People that are familiar with child themes basically know that if you copy your template file from your parent theme into your child theme, it basically replaces that file. Functions.php doesn't work that way. Functions.php actually gets added onto the bottom of the functions.php file from your parent theme. So whatever you need to add to a functions.php file, you can just add it right to that file, and you don't have to copy the other one. In fact, if you actually copy it, it breaks it. So just add your code to a new functions.php file, and this is what that code looks like. Again, this is all publicly available through Alexis, or you can also download it from one of the links that are on this page. But that's what it looks like. You add that to that functions.php file, and then you download the WooCommerce.css file. I've got a link right there. And once you do those two fairly simple things, it takes your fairly ugly WooCommerce product page, and instead of showing the shop looking like this, now it looks like that, and it's got a very nice clean vertical scrolling instead of having the columns being in 3 columns. And instead of your product page looking like this, it now looks like this, which is much easier to navigate and generally much more pleasing to look at on a smartphone. So you've got your gallery images, your title is much easier to read, everything is in a nice clear column, and we no longer have the world's largest pull-down menu. So, At this point, you would want to go back, add your products, add your attributes, any variations you want to add. You can make whatever changes you want to Alexis's CSS to make it work the way you want it to. Important note, if you did enable the PayPal sandbox, make sure you remember to go back and turn that off. I have seen situations where people were confused as to why they weren't getting paid, and I just found a very simple little check mark that they had to uncheck. So just be aware that if you are using the PayPal sandbox, make sure you go back, change your email address in PayPal to the actual live PayPal account you want it to work with, and to disable that sandbox. And I wish everybody great luck with what it is that they're selling, what it is they're setting up. If there's any questions regarding any of this, WooThemes is out there. They've got a great support site. Craig Douglas, the Hollywood WordPress meetup, is available. I'll be there as well next month, I'm sure. So I thank you. I apologize for not having this done right the first time, but here's the information. I hope it was useful, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.